Hi Crypt Keepers, thanks for tuning in to AmysCrypt. This video will take you to 10 of the scariest and most haunted dungeons and torture chambers in the world. These are places of great despair, suffering and death, so it makes sense that they would be haunted by those who perished within them in the past. The first scary dungeon and torture chamber on this list brings us to the heart of Hungary in Budapest. Here, hidden deep underground, is the Buda Labyrinth. This is a dark, winding network of tunnels directly beneath the city. It's also said to be one of the most haunted places in the country. The Buda Labyrinth is essentially a series of tunnels and caves just below the grandiose Buda Castle. They've also been used since ancient times as tools and artifacts that are extremely aged have been discovered down there. But it is the darker side of this tunnel's uses that have left stains of the paranormal behind. In the past, the Buda Labyrinth has been used as a torture chamber, prison, dungeon, and even a wartime shelter. A number of skeletons have also been located in the depths of the labyrinth. Many believe that these have only contributed to the paranormal activity in the tunnel system. Some of the most common scary events to occur in the labyrinth are hearing disembodied voices or screams, sighting apparitions, and there are even reports of meeting one's doppelganger in one particular area of the tunnels. Further rumours that Vlad Tepes, the real-life inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula, was once imprisoned in the tunnels, and that his spirit remains exist. Though I'm not sure if this is more of a myth or a historical fact. Remember, if you would like to watch full videos on any of the locations on this list, check the video's description where I will leave them linked. You should also check me out and follow me on Instagram at AmysCrypt, as I share photographs of all the haunted places I visit over there. Our next destination lies in Poland, within the Łagów Castle. This structure has stood in the centre of town with all its rich history since 1299. Today, the castle, which once stood as a fortress, has been converted to a lavish upper-class hotel. But this castle-turned hotel is a special twist for the brave, since it boasts a torture-themed room where guests can spend the night. Apart from looking super creepy, this room is said to be the area where the original torture chamber for the castle existed, and it's also said to be haunted. Supposedly, the spirit of a commander who once owned the castle appears at the foot of the bed to men who spend time in the room. Though he has been sighted numerous times, the first report of this ghost dates way back to 1820. A famous ghost story of lost love also took place at the castle. This story tells of an enemy prince who was captured by a knight and thrown into the dungeon. He soon became well known due to his beautiful singing voice, which the townspeople could hear coming from his cell. Later, the sister of the knight who had imprisoned the prince became interested in meeting the man with the beautiful singing voice, so she bribed the dungeon guard, and it wasn't too long before the couple fell deeply in love. Sadly, this love was forbidden and the knight's sister was already promised to marry another man. On her wedding day, the imprisoned prince was ordered to sing at her wedding. He refused, was beheaded, and is now said to haunt the dungeon, with people claiming to still hear his ghostly singing. Our next haunted destination brings us to England and the Tower of London. This historic castle has a long history, with the oldest structure on the grounds being the White Tower, which dates back to 1078 when it was built by William the Conqueror. The tower's bloody past, of course, has involved moments of torture, and the site has even functioned as a prison during its lifetime. The castle is also claimed to be very haunted, with many believing it to be one of the most haunted places in England even. Some of the ghost stories here involve people who were imprisoned and were later executed, including the famed Anne Boleyn. Plenty of other spirits are said to haunt the grounds, but the tower today also boasts a pretty impressive collection of torture devices, such as the rack, and it seems entirely possible that the ghosts of those imprisoned, tortured, and executed could still remain within the grounds of the castle. Some areas even still contain graffiti left behind by prisoners, so could their souls still be trapped just as the final words remain etched into the stone walls of the Tower of London? Our next haunted dungeon lies within the picturesque Corvin Castle in Hunedoara, Romania. The castle dates back to the 15th century and has a dark past and a number of ghostly legends. The stunning stronghold of Corvin has served many purposes throughout its lifetime, yet of course has been used as both a prison and torture chamber. Supposedly at some point during his life, Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, or the real-life inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula, was captured and imprisoned in the dungeon beneath the Hall of Kings at the castle. It is claimed that Vlad was imprisoned here in the darkness for some 7 years during the early 1400s. Legend has it that within his small dark cell, Vlad was traumatized. He was constantly met by the sounds of other fellow prisoners being tortured and executed. This is also said to be where Vlad developed his taste for blood, surviving solely on the blood of dirty rats he captured in the dungeon. Whether there is any truth to these stories or not, there are claims that Vlad's spirit still remains at the castle, haunting it to this day. Other spirits are said to remain within the castle, which makes sense given its dark past. Corvin also contains a vast collection of torture devices and a pit where prisoners were fed to wild animals such as bears. Our next haunted location has protected Peru's coastline since the mid-1700s. The Real Felipe Fortress is an impressive stronghold located in an area that was commonly targeted by pirates, as well as where many battles for Peru's independence were fought. Today, the historic building contains the country's military museum, but it also boasts one of the most brutal dungeons on this list, which is, of course, considered to be incredibly haunted. The fort's dungeon lies deep within the belly of the King's Tower. It is here one will find a long, narrow prison. This is a place where up to 80 men would be crammed, squeezing them into the tight space, unable to move and forced to slowly starve to death. The horrific passings from those who were imprisoned here are thought to have made this one of the most haunted places in the fort. Here, people have sighted shadow figures, heard disembodied voices of people crying out in pain, felt sudden temperature drops, seen light anomalies, and then there are the footsteps, bangs and knocks commonly heard when no one is near. Now, onwards to our next location, Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. This iconic castle has remained perched on a hill overlooking Edinburgh since the 12th century. The fortress has seen countless sieges, battles and deaths throughout its lifetime, making it one of the most haunted places and castles in the United Kingdom. In addition to these many battles, the castle also boasts a pretty spooky dungeon. This is considered to be one of the more haunted areas of the castle, though it has many. It's said that all the pain, suffering and torment from those who died down there have left behind residual energy. Former prisoners who perished in the poor living conditions of these dungeons, from malnourishment, disease, or even brutal torture methods, are claimed to linger where they died. Supposedly many to visit the castle have heard and seen things in the dungeon, which could be considered paranormal. I have even had a reader leave a comment on my website, AmysCrypt.com, describing her visit to the castle, where she felt as though she was grabbed by someone on the shoulder while passing through the dungeon area. Next up is a gorgeous little castle in the Irish countryside that is one of the most notoriously haunted places in the world. Lapcastle dates back to the 1200s and is a place containing a lot of dark history involving battles, murders and torture. The part of Lapcastle, which we are most interested in for this video, was uncovered during more recent excavations. Inside the Bloody Chapel, appropriately named for its history of murder, there was a small dungeon discovered. This dungeon consists of a small opening, which would likely have had a trapdoor entry, where victims would have been dropped to fall to the bottom. From here, they would never leave, though others may have been dropped on top of them to suffer the same fate of a slow, painful death. This type of dungeon is known as an oubliette, meaning to forget in French. It makes complete sense that this room would be haunted given that the dungeon contained the bones of some 150 different people when it was discovered. Manila in the Philippines is where we find our next haunted dungeon. The Fort Santiago, which dates back to the 1500s, was designed in a Spanish fashion, with its original use intended to keep the surrounding area safe. It has seen many different uses over the years, yet importantly has functioned as a prison, both during the Spanish colonial period and during World War II. These prisons sported poor living conditions, suffered from overcrowding and saw torture and countless deaths within. It's also what is predominantly said to have made the fort so haunted. In addition to one of the Philippines' national heroes haunting this fort, Jose Rizal, there are thought to be countless other spirits remaining. Many of these are said to be former prisoners that were both tortured and executed in the dungeons after the Japanese captured the fort during World War II. Visitors to the area have claimed to sight the apparitions of these prisoners, as well as feeling sudden temperature drops, hearing screams from the past, and even claiming to be touched by unseen forces. Now we make our way back to England to perhaps the most notorious castle on this list, Chillingham. This fortress dates back to the 1300s and has an extremely bloody past. It of course ranks so high on this list, not only for being haunted, but because it boasts both a torture chamber and a dungeon. The castle's torture chamber is an infamous place and was home to perhaps England's most notorious torturer, a sadistic man known as John Sage. Sage is responsible for torturing and killing what is rumoured to be thousands of people at the castle. It is his ghost that is said to haunt the torture chamber to this day, remaining there as a truly dark force. He is said to be malevolent and wishes to inflict harm on visitors. But in addition to Sage, some of his victims are also said to remain trapped. And it's not uncommon for people to report hearing their distressed screams. Another area of the castle where paranormal activity is said to have occurred is its small dungeon. Here, marks are still etched on the wall from prisoners who were held within, and an oubliette still displaying bones is present in the floor of the horrific cell. The number one place on this list has been held for the world's most prolific female serial killer and her castle. Welcome to Lapcastle Castle, high in the mountains of Slovakia, the place where Elizabeth Bathory, better known as the Blood Countess, once lived. The castle dates back to the 13th century and was passed into possession to Bathory in 1575 as a wedding gift. It was here that the brutal torture and murders of hundreds of young girls would take place, deep below the castle in a dark dungeon. It is said that Bathory killed up to 650 young girls to bathe in and drink their blood, hence protecting her own youthful appearance. This is of course where her nickname, the Blood Countess, came from. Though the legitimacy of these crimes is often debated, Elizabeth was trialled for these murders and confined to a tower at the castle, where she would eventually pass away. The Blood Countess is now said to haunt the castle, though so are her victims. Many claim to have sighted full-body apparitions of those tormented souls roaming the area, as well as shadow figures, and then there are those who have heard the cries of young girls echoing through the castle and its underground dungeon. What dungeon or torture chamber on this list do you think is the most haunted? Or perhaps you know of one that I missed? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. But I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to like, comment, share and subscribe. That really helps me out. If you would like to do any more reading on any of the haunted dungeons or haunted torture chambers in this video, head to AmysCrypt.com. You can also watch full episodes for these locations linked in this video's description. If you'd like to see bonus content from me, check out my Patreon and YouTube memberships, which are linked below. But thank you so much for watching, Crypt Keepers. Until next time.